Most of the things that we believe to be a fact in our lives are told to us through our stories or the news that we hear. So my question would be, if they were deceiving you with the stories they tell you, would you be able to recognize that?
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 The dangerous, edges here are that he's trying to undermine the media, trying to make up his own facts, and it could be that while unemployment and the economy worsens, he could have undermined the messaging so much that he can actually control exactly what people think, and that is our job. That is our job. That is our job.
So I started looking. It was like a family tree. The connections between our government personnel and the media corporations was unbelievable. Google, Amazon, Netflix, Twitter, CNN, ABC. So what would happen if all these companies had the same political ideology or agenda?
We're at war. In a true sense, we're at war. And we're fighting an invisible enemy.
This is like a war. And in a war, you do whatever is needed to be done to take care of your people.
This is, in effect, a government on a wartime footing, a government calling for a collective national effort, as Boris Johnson would do, quotes, whatever it takes.
We must act like any wartime government.
Well, I think that the threat is very significant. The potential of the virus, it's already demonstrated in China. I mean, I don't think it's a crazy analogy to compare this to World War II.
Messieurs, en direct de Charenton tout de suite. Si on me dit pas qu'on se prépare à être un confiné, l'Arzise.
Se recomienda que eviten salir a la vía pública solamente. Les habla Policía Monte cuando sea necesario. Que permanezcan dentro de su domicilio.
This drone, equipped with a megaphone, hovers before a crowd, blaring a warning. The operator, a local traffic cop.
Where's your mask? Put it on.
Hey, you on the bike. Put on your mask when you're in the street. Don't endanger your fellow citizens.
You can't stay on the green. Can you all go home? Can you all go home, please? It's not a holiday. It's a lockdown, which means you don't just come in and sunbathe.
Let's do it just more, feels weird because he's putting something between your eyes. One more time. You don't have a fever.
No, wait. Just reach low again.
There you go.
One more time.
Israel has given its security agencies the power to track the mobile data of people suspected of having the virus. The government will use the information to force them into quarantine and warn those who've come into contact with them. South Korea has taken similar steps by using mobile phone and satellite technology to track potential carriers.
The use of tech surveillance has been increasing due to the COVID-19 pandemic across the globe. Several governments have taken to tracking location data via mobile carriers to check if patients who should be isolated are staying isolated, as well as tracking how well their stay-at-home or quarantine orders are holding up. Carriers in Italy, Germany, and Austria within the European Union are continuously sharing data with health authorities, but these are not the only countries using cell phone location data, with Iran using an app called AC-19 to China's tracking and Taiwan's electronic fencing of their quarantined people.
The U.S. is tracking people's movements with phone data, and it's part of a massive increase in global surveillance. And it goes on to talk about governments across the world galvanizing every surveillance tool at their disposal to help stem the spread of the novel coronavirus.
Poland is taking a different approach. In order to ensure people are quarantining themselves correctly, they use something called the Home Quarantine app to make people register a selfie, then periodically send new selfies through the app or face a police report. And each of those selfies has location information in place. If they do not download and use the app, they may receive unexpected visits from police.
In Hangzhou, to enter a tower block, you need to have your temperature taken and registered. And you must have an app on your phone into which you input your name, temperature, recent travel, and ID number. The information generates a color code.
We actually looked at the back-end code that the app was running, and what you could see is the moment that a user gives it permission to access data, it immediately sends a function that says report info and location to police. And then we looked into it, and the police were a key developer of the product as well. And so from that you can tell that the data is basically being sent back to the police the moment somebody actually uses the app.
Last week, a top WHO, World Health Organization official stated that it's time for authorities to come to your home to see who's infected and take them away.
They're using apps now to do that. They're testing apps, but they didn't do it with apps in Singapore. They did that with community workers, with public health workers, visiting the houses, checking on people, checking their health status every day and saying, how are you? Have you got a fever? Have you got a cough? And if a contact has developed a cough or a fever, they were taken immediately for testing. Now we need to go and look in families to find those people who may be sick and remove them and isolate them.
When will a corona vaccine be ready? A vaccine that enables us to resume our lives without restrictions while protecting us from the disease. I'm afraid we need to be patient and keep our distance for a while longer.
In the race for a coronavirus vaccine, some scientists are focusing on the development of vaccines based on messenger RNA, or mRNA. This involves injecting a person with the instructions for part of the virus. Whether that will really work is what's being tested with the tools being developed here.
But they're not starting from scratch. They're employing an approach called Vaccine Rapid Response Platforms. Vaccines developed with rapid response platforms work differently. Rather than directly injecting antigens into the body, these types of vaccines typically send instructions to cells in the body. It gets the cells to produce antigen proteins that are specific to the virus it's designed to defeat. These instructions are in the form of RNA or DNA, the molecules that contain the code for building proteins. Plus, once scientists identify and create the instructions for one virus, they can tweak those instructions.
The experimental RNA vaccine manufactured by Moderna is funded by both Bill Gates and the NIHID, which Fauci leads.
You might recall I had mentioned that from the time we had available sequence, we would hope to be in clinical trials within 2 to 3 months. The gene has been expressed in the platform, in this case a messenger RNA.
And this type of RNA vaccine has never been before used on humans. Now, typically vaccines take years to develop, not weeks. And they are already testing this brand new RNA vaccine on humans. Fauci's NIH are the ones conducting the vaccine test right now. And by the way, they skipped the usual animal testing phase and started testing on human guinea pigs.
Eventually, what we'll have to have is certificates of who's a recovered person, who's a vaccinated person, because you don't want people moving around the world where you'll have some countries that won't have it under control.
Gates openly talks about vaccinating everyone on the planet before life can return to, quote, normal.
The ultimate solution, the only thing that really lets us go back completely to normal and feel good about sitting in a stadium with lots of other people, is to create a vaccine and not just take care of our country, but take that vaccine out to the global population.
The Australian Prime Minister has stated that life will not return to normal until there is a vaccine. Johnson & Johnson, who participated in the UN Gates Event 201 pandemic simulation, is preparing mass vaccines. Denmark has mandated vaccines through an emergency order. And in Italy, you may have to have a COVID pass to prove you have a marker of immunity.
Immunity passports could speed up return to work after COVID-19. And this case, this report coming from The Guardian about a week ago, this case, they're not talking about immunity passports to travel internationally. No, this is to go to work, to access public transit, to do anything in the public sphere is going to require an immunity passport to show that you've got the antibodies or you've got the vaccine. If you've taken the vaccine, you'll get your immunity passport and you'll be allowed to travel, to work, to make money in order to put food on your family's table.
WHO right now is meeting with Google and all of the internet companies to say that only information coming from WHO and CDC about coronavirus should be shared and allowed on the internet.
Twitter have decided to take it upon themselves to delete a few tweets by Jair Bolsonaro because they believe that it is misinformation. As Glenn Greenwald says here, he was showing videos of himself going into crowds in Brazil, hyping hydrochloride as a cure and encouraging an end to isolation. And Twitter decided they were going to delete these tweets.
Oh, by the way, as a bug, Facebook just accidentally basically censored and blocked and removed every single article and post on coronavirus recently. And of course, the WHO director did come out and say that what we're dealing with is not just a pandemic, it's an infodemic. So this has already been seeded into the popular imagination, and it was already sitting there waiting to be enacted by the Event 201 crew, who are the very ones coordinating the response to the real-life version of what they simulated.
And now here we are, we didn't simulate this, we didn't practice. So both the health policies and economic policies, we find ourselves in uncharted territory.
We didn't simulate this, we didn't practice this. Now everybody who's listening to this channel, even if you're new, I'm sure you've heard of Event 201, and you know that that is an outright lie. For those who are unaware, here we are at the Center for Health Security.org/Event 201, and let's just read a little bit about this. The Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, in partnership with the World Economic Forum and, oh, look at this, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, hosted Event 201, a high-level pandemic exercise on October 18, 2019.
We are in an unprecedented situation, and the normal rules no longer apply. People are suffering, sick, and scared. And current responses at the country level will not address the global scale and complexity of the crisis. But in managing this crisis, we also have a unique opportunity, as we need to immediately move away from a situation where each country is undertaking its own health strategies to one that ensures in full transparency a coordinated global response, including helping countries that are less prepared to tackle the crisis. I welcome the decision by G20 leaders to convene an emergency summit next week to respond to the epic challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, and I look forward to taking part.
G20 summits are normally lavish set-piece events. This was last year in Osaka, Japan.
What is martial law? Increase in COVID-19 related rules, curfews, has led to circulation of rumors surrounding martial law, and it helpfully defines martial law as a term that describes the government order of replacing civil rule with the military in a time of war or emergency.
This is right after he signed the national emergency into effect.
It is only the beginning of what we're really doing, and now we're in a different phase. I am officially declaring a national emergency.
In response to the worsening situation and ahead of an anticipated nationwide curfew, the IDF entered its highest state of alert, which practically means the Israeli military's emergency preparedness for war.
The president of the region of Lombardy has said that he wants the military to be called in to enforce the lockdown, calling on people to stay at home. This is really the mantra that they're leading out to the public at large.
This morning, emergency measures in New York. The state's governor deploying the National Guard to New Rochelle, a suburb of New York City, in an effort to contain a coronavirus outbreak there.
We've now passed this emergency coronavirus legislation, and man, this is just I'm just blown away that this is something that we can do. So Matt Hancock, the health secretary, said that this will allow extraordinary measures never seen in peacetime in the UK. Jesus, it's cleared the House of Lords. It's going to happen. So it gives them, as they say, wide-ranging powers. Now, I'm not too worried about the workforce and the easing of pressure. It's the limiting of contact, the control of people's movements that I'm more concerned about.
So this new bill, which is HC 122, or simply the coronavirus bill, police, public health, and immigration officers will be able to detain people suspected of having COVID-19 and exact £1,000 fines for refusing tests under emergency powers that have been rolled out now by the UK government.
Australia has declared a state of emergency and has invoked these new powers in much the same way as Britain has. The formal declaration gives the government the power to close off cities or regions, impose curfews, and order people to quarantine if deemed necessary to contain the spread of the virus. This is terrifying. This is absolutely terrifying because, like in Virginia, 25 people have died. Boom, entire state shut down. You know, Australia, boom, entire country now can be quarantined at the whim of the government, just if they decide. Like Australia has recorded 425 infections and 5 deaths. Boom, entire country locked down. And then you get Hungary. And Hungary decided to just go full-on dictatorship. Here's a quick summary of what's in it. State of emergency without time limit. And rule by decree. Parliament suspended. No elections. If you spread fake news and rumours, you get up to 5 years in prison. If you leave quarantine, up to 8 years in prison. This is mad. Like, this is full-on dictatorship.
Police are ramping up their crackdown on Sydney's parks and beaches, and you'll no longer escape with just a warning. Officers have handed the first fines to those not obeying the rules, and as you're about to see, everyone is a target.
2 young mums, one breastfeeding her baby, both of them just minding their business. They're locked in conversation with a police officer, and they find it hard to believe he is telling them to move on. But nobody was off limits, with police on a mission at Coogee Beach.
Go home, please. Quick exercise around the block and then get home.
Reading the paper under a tree, tradies having their lunch. A mum sitting on a bench by herself, told she has to leave too. Is this a police state?
What is happening right now are powers being accrued by authoritarians that will never be relinquished. Once these powers are put in place and the precedent is there, even if the emergency is released and everything goes back to normal a few weeks from now, it will be a new normal.
It sounds like little by little Beijing and maybe the entire country starting to return to normal. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's fair to say I would call it not normal, but maybe the new normal.
As we wake up to a new normal today and life is slowly grinding to a halt,
Americans are facing a new normal.
This will be the new normal.
You know, I think it's too bad in a way that we have had to have these epidemics to get us to move.
You launched CEPI because you believe the world is unprepared for the next pandemic. What is CEPI?
CEPI is a coalition for epidemic preparedness.
When we start to understand what this agenda is really about, which is total and complete control over every aspect of every human being on the planet, their movement, their actions, their activities, their transactions, their interactions with people, down to the individual level, the complete and utter control of your life in every regard, well, guess what? That is being enabled on the back of this pandemic scare.
And rights aren't rights if someone can take them away. They're privileges. That's all we've ever had in this country is a bill of temporary privileges. And if you read the news even badly, you know that every year the list gets shorter and shorter and shorter.